Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
It's time to rewrite the vacation rules. With Royal Caribbean, your family can look forward to just about anything. Break the thrill barrier, roaring down the tallest water slide in North America. Jump into breathtaking jungles and jaw-dropping coves. Vibe off the charts on our private island Perfect Day at Coco Cay. And end the day knowing things are just getting started. Because this isn't just any vacation. This is all the vacations. Come seek the Royal Caribbean. Ships Registry, Bahamas.
Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game, with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire, who has an infinite variety of ways of telling me that we are actually recording, all of which make me laugh. It's Bank Holiday Monday morning, Kieran. I couldn't be more chipper because Palace haven't lost so far this weekend, and also no one of us really care what happens between now and the semi-final. But also, it's just started raining really heavily, so that'll be on your way for the talking of ducklings, by the way. I don't know if you've noticed, we've had several photographs, Kieran, of people sent to us of ducklings, very young ducklings, clearly happy as Larry, in ponds or water. So somewhere along the line.
The secret duckling correspondent who told me you've got to keep them in hay was telling me a bit of a fib as Finley wanders into the room.
That's Finley wandering out, going, they're still in the hay?
Yes.
I think that's a very nice way of cooking them, I understand, Kieran, isn't it? It's what the French do. It's maybe there's special Sussex ducklings that are too sensitive for water. I just got this image of them when they finally do get the water going,
bit cold.
That's cold. Did you have a pleasant weekend, Kieran? Did you watch your game? Did you go to your game yesterday?
Of course. Yeah. I had eight of my students came down. Managed to get tickets for the match.
Of course you did.
So that was good. Baroness, of course, was in house duty of trying to be mother hen to everybody. But we had a massive barbecue on Saturday night and a big fry up yesterday.
Lovely.
To show them how us lecturers live.
She's got 4 ducklings in the back garden, Kieran. You mother hen to them. It's a terrible sign that it's that stage of the season when you manage to get 8 tickets together.
Yes.
Yeah, it'll be fine. There's nothing going on. I imagine if anybody wants tickets for Selhurst Park tonight, they'll be able to get 8 together. It's questions day, Kieran. We have some very good questions. I think it's worth pointing out in passing, those Reading fans who have been listening to us with some trepidation for quite some time now, they can really look forward to Thursday's pod because that deal is finally done, I believe, Kieran. I think we can say the T's have been crossed, the I's have been dotted, Reading have new owners.
The deal has been agreed.
Yes. Oh, okay. It's been
so yes, 99% happy. Like all contracts, having sold businesses when I used to work in the wacky world of insolvency, you can agree terms, but people can still walk away. But there's certainly a willingness on both sides, which is not what we've always had before. Price has been agreed. Can't see any problems here. So, those Reading fans have been saying, when are you going to come and do the price of football in Reading? We said, when the deal's through. I don't think Di Younger would have welcomed us there.
No, to be perfectly, I know this will sound cynical, Kieran, but we've been waiting till Reading's got a new owner who might be happy to cough up some cash. and frankly, I know we do this for the love and the integrity, but if somebody feels like bunging 10% on top for essentially all the work we've done, but yeah, we'll happily do Reading. We possibly Southend in view, but we'll be doing 3 or 4 more live gigs this season. Another big story, which we'll be covering in detail on Thursday, Kieran, is Nottingham Forest, because it turns out their quest for the Champions League may have unintended consequences in terms of their owners' share of the club, but we'll be covering that in detail. We do have these very good questions. Now, this first question, Kieran, it comes from Steph Petrucci, and it's something that we've discussed a lot on the Guns, but we've never actually been asked this question, and I think it's a very valid one. And Steph says, why in the world are academy players accounted for as pure profit when it comes to PSR? Academies are expensive to run. Academy players cost money to train, educate, assess and manage medically. So if a club raises a kid from age 8 or 9 to they're sold 10, 12 years later, shouldn't the costs of that be factored into the sale price? It's a very good question, Kieran, because we've never questioned it ourselves. We just automatically go, well, yeah, of course, academy costs don't count to PSR.
That's right. And if we take a look at academy costs at the elite level, I think Aston Villa estimate that their academy cost them somewhere in the region of £18 million. You have clubs such as Manchester City, who send their academy kids, or some of their academy kids, to a private school called St Bede's, which is very, very impressive educational establishment. I think Manchester United have perhaps a broadly similar deal with Manchester Grammar School. So clubs are taking some care over the young people who are coming through. But let's look at this from a PSR perspective. The profit that goes into a player sale calculation is based on the agreed compensation fee that the club's going to receive, i.e. the sale price, less the purchase price. So if we take a purchase price less amortization. So if we take Romelu Lukaku, Chelsea bought him for £97 million. By the time that he left, he'd been there 3 years out of 5, so therefore his value was 39 million. I think they sold him for 38. So they had a PSR loss of £1 million. When it comes to an academy player, when that player signs their contract, normally you'll sign a youth deal at the age of 16, and then you can sign your first pro deal at the age of 18, where you can sign a 5-year, 10-year contract, whatever you really want to do. You're an adult in the eyes of the industry. The football club has not paid for that contract. So therefore, the cost to the club is zero. And we also need to remember that for every one player who does sign a contract on their 18th birthday, there's 99 who have been told thanks, but no thanks. So we don't show the losses that clubs make on those 99 players. That's simply just deemed to be academy, the general running cost of the academy. In exactly the same way that we don't factor in when a senior player is sold, we don't factor in to the calculations the cost of training them, their medical costs, the other costs, the other non-wage costs which are included as far as their welfare is concerned at the club. So it's purely from an accounting point of view. It is sale price less book value, and in the book value for an academy player is usually zero. Now, the only time when that might not be the place is, let's say you've got a promising 18-year-old, they're thinking about signing a contract, and you need to get that deal over the line. So you have a chat with their agent, and the agent says, yeah, I think we can possibly do this. I need some sort of compensation for persuading the young person to sign for you. So let's say that you sling the agent 10 million. Well, in those under those circumstances, the agent's cost would be deemed to be effectively the transfer fee, and that would be spread over the amortization period of based on the length of the contract. So if it's a very good player, then there is an element. We talk about when Jack Grealish was sold to Manchester City and he became the first £100 million player. But if you take a look at the Aston Villa accounts for that year, and I suspect I was probably the only person that still remembers these numbers, it was a £98 million profit that was shown. People go, well, why was that the case? It could be that there was a wee bit of value in Jack's contract, even though there was no transfer fee paid for him as such.
See, now I understand all that, Kieran, but I think just in terms of exploring what Steph Petrucci said, so Mason Mount wasn't a teenager when he moved to Manchester United, was he? So he would have been paid quite a hefty chunk of wages by Chelsea for a season or two.
Yep.
Take Conor Gallagher as an example, Chelsea Academy. What if Conor Gallagher had stayed with Chelsea till he was 27 before he moved to another club? I take it he still counts as an academy player, and therefore, but in that he would have been paid 10 years of £60,000 a week. So that seems a bit odd then, and that still counts as pure profit when you paid a player that much money in that period.
Yeah, I think you need to separate two elements. First of all, there's the cost of registering the player's contract and the compensation that it cost the club in acquiring that contract, and then there's the running costs. It's a bit like if you buy a house for 300 grand and it's costing you 10 grand a year to heat and light and so on, you quite happily treat those as separate issues. If I then sell that house for 350 grand, I'd say, well, my profit was the difference between the sale price and the cost, and I would ignore the day-to-day running costs. So the wages is simply a running cost of a footballer in the same way that petrol or diesel or electricity is in terms of the running costs for a car, or light, heat, water, rates and so on is the running cost for a property.
Have you been spending any time with Ali? Because the way you said you have to separate those two elements, you had the exact same look on the face as Ali gets when she says you have to put the bottles in the blue bin and the paper in the green. It's exactly the same look, as though you're explaining something to a 9-year-old.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to. I'm a teacher. I'm explaining things is what I do.
Yeah, but you see me as a 9-year-old, don't you? I understand that. Now, Jeff Matty has got a question. Again, it's one of those we could take up the entire pod on Jeff Matty's question, Kieran, but it's a good one. And also, it's incredible. Every live show we did, so we did a lovely live show in Rotherham last week, we will always get asked a similar question, which is basically, if you could start again, what would you do? And so Jeff Matty says, say it was possible to reset football money regionally, nationally, globally. What changes would you make to the distribution of money and money in the game in general? Is there a model that could give a fairer playing field to all and possibly open up a situation whereby a club that has not historically won leagues trophies, Crystal Palace, could rival the top clubs for silverware and create a real interest in jeopardy into our beautiful game? I'm going to suggest, Kieran, that there are probably many models of fairer distribution. The problem is persuading the clubs further up the food chain to take part in those models.
Yeah, every club executive and every club owner has a responsibility to put the best interests of that club first. And we refer to that as a fiduciary duty. So even though we had Paul Barber from Brighton, and I know you know Steve Parish at Palace, I absolutely understand why they're opposed to a football regulator, because their they have to represent the best interest of Crystal Palace Football Club, Brighton and Hove Albion Football Club. If you're Omar Barada, the interest of Manchester United Football Club, and you don't have a responsibility towards the broader game. So what we have is a set of rules which have been based on short-term self-interest of individual clubs. And people say, well, that's wrong. Okay, but we are guilty of short-term self-interest decisions every single day. So I think it was on Thursday night, I'd been to a gig, I was coming home, and I was walking past a kebab house. The sensible part of me says, you're not actually that hungry, Kieran. Keep on, as the Stranglers say, walk on by. But the short-term self-interest part of me, and I'm probably one of the few people that eats kebab sober, remember, said, it's my favourite kebab house. Their chili sauce is to die for. And I wander in, and it's not in my best. So, but the short-term self-interest of that taste hit overrode the fact that A, I wasn't hungry, and B, I need to lose quite a bit of weight. So we do it on an individual basis. Clubs do it on the basis of what's in their best interest in the short term. Back to Jeff's question, and now he has said, and I think this is where it does get intriguing, possible to reset football money regionally, nationally, but globally. Now, globally is a fascinating one because there are 200 members of FIFA. Is it realistic to expect the Turks and Caicos Islands to have a chance of winning the World Cup? I'm not sure, because football with a small population, bigger countries with bigger populations, it's and also that history and heritage of football being embedded into the fabric of society exists in some countries, and not necessarily to the same extent. And that's not a bad thing. Having a variety of sports that countries are interested in is absolutely fantastic, and it shouldn't be football. But I think if we were to do it sort of on a not necessarily a global basis, but a sort of a quasi-global basis, the reason why American franchise sports are more democratic. Yes. I can't pronounce words.
It's a cross between demographic and democratic. Yeah,
yes.
We know what you're trying to say. You've had too many kebabs, haven't you?
I've had too many kebabs, and I was on LBC at 6:30 this morning.
Why?
Because they asked me to. I can't say no. You're giving me now. Who's giving the look?
That's
you're
true.
Giving me the look. How many talkings to? Just because somebody asked you.
Why? Yeah. Well, it's the same answer you gave me when I said, "Why have you got 4 ducklings in your back garden?" You say you asked me to, because your granddaughter lied about you not having a dog. Essentially.
What we could do is to have some better system of distribution of players, but then we're using young men and young women as commodities to benefit individual football clubs. And why should somebody that's been brought up in South London or Manchester or Nice or Cologne or wherever it's going, why should they be forced to move to another club within Europe simply to have greater competitive balance within the European player framework? So these things could be done. Some form of draft system, some form of agreed wage cap, even though intuitively I'm opposed to wage caps within the industry. It could be done. I think on a national basis, you can't have a draft system. Wage caps, there's the danger of losing players to go elsewhere. But I was just talking to somebody about the German 50+1 system, and they say, it's absolutely great. It's absolutely great until you think, who's going to win the Bundesliga this year? Oh, it's Bayern Munich. And who's going to win it last year? Oh, it's Bayern Munich. And who's going to win it next year? Oh, it's going to be Bayern Munich. And that's a downside. What if you want to challenge the status quo? And we saw challenges to the status quo through the actions of Roman Abramovich, putting more money into Chelsea Football Club, Sheikh Mansour in Manchester City, and recently, even though with the constraints of PSR, Newcastle United, Aston Villa, Nottingham Forest, and so on. So can we do something? And this is where, I think some of the views that I've had, and I know our good friend Nick DeMarco, he's also keen on an owner's bond. If you want to overspend compared to the rest of the league in order to, because we pointed out, Nottingham Forest promoted to the Premier League with a squad which cost £12 million. How can they be expected to compete under a PSR environment with Chelsea Football Club, who have got a squad which cost £1.4 billion? That's the epitome of unfairness, and PSR reinforces that. So if you want to go above the agreed limit of spending, you do that and you deal with that in one of two ways. If you want to spend an extra £100 million, then you put £100 million into the club and you put £100 million into a bond. So if things go wrong, you walk away from the club. It's another form of parachute. It's a way of, you've not got a crisis, you've got a time to reach a decision and to find new owners and to find a solution. And the other thing, which I've always been in favour of, is, again, above a certain level, you have a transfer tax, and that transfer tax is set at a high level. So if you want to spend an extra £100 million and you set your transfer tax at 200%, 500%, or you've on a sliding scale, the nuances and the degree of complexity is to be sorted out later, you can do so, but then money gets recycled back into the game and that gets distributed to other clubs. And not all of it gets kept in the Premier League as well. So those would be the things that I would do. PSR does help. It does try to encourage clubs to invest in academies. It does encourage them to invest in infrastructure, all of which can benefit the club on a long-term basis. But again, like the kebab, we all want the dopamine hits of instant gratification. It is trying to get that balance between short-term and long-term benefits.
When you think about super successful businesses that are selling through the roof, like Heinz or Mattel, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and brilliant marketing. But there's a secret. The business behind the business, making selling simple for them and buying simple for their customers. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout as Heinz and Mattel. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/promo, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/promo to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/promo.
Your snacking routine can get a little dull. Time for a light and fit remix. Like a crunchy storm of graham cookies, caramel pearls, and dark chocolate, showering down into a smooth, creamy yogurt. Enjoy 3 light and fit remix varieties with craveable flavors and up to 120 calories and 10 grams of protein per 4.5-ounce serving. See remixyogurt.com.
We'll come back to the kebab, Kieran. Let's deal with the serious bits, the bit we like to call the BAFTA bit. First of all, our German fans would point out that Bayern didn't win the league last season. But yes, having said that, I think our German fans would also accept that RB Leipzig, who have attempted in the past 2 decades to sort of, shall we say, elasticate some of the German PSR rules in an attempt to compete, have made themselves the most unpopular club in Germany by doing so, because the 50+1 rule is understandably sacred to a lot of German fans, and RB Leipzig have really rocked the boat in an attempt to bring an extra bit of competitiveness. Secondly, with that fiduciary duty, which I believe is a lyric in a Mary Poppins song.
Is it?
I think it is, yes. I think it's probably the first time I ever heard it. And I think it's important that football fans know that it's a legal requirement in a way for Steve Parish and the owner of Brighton. It's legal. It's their job to make sure that that those clubs that they own, especially the ones that have shareholders and investors, do as well as possible. And that precludes them cooperating with other teams or giving other teams money. I mean, there's a moral duty, we would argue, and we always have done, that drive for success shouldn't preclude you helping out those clubs that are a long way below the food chain. But at the basic level, self-interest is their job, basically, yes. in terms of, club owners always talk about, being guardians of the club and sustainability. But while they are guarding the club for the fans, their job is to make sure they leave that club in a better position than when they found it. Now, the non-BAFTA stuff. First of all, what gig were you coming back from? Who you'd been to see?
It was an obscure Norwegian folk duo.
That's a tautology, isn't it?
Yes, I suppose so.
Are there any Norwegian folk duos that aren't obscure?
Yeah, they're okay. Sort of sang in English with the occasional Norwegian chorus. I can't remember their name, but it seemed like a good idea at the time. It's the Brighton Great Escape in a fortnight, which is a 3-day music festival, and every pub and club and venue is open. So I've got my wristband for that, and building myself up for that.
That Boudou Glimt interview we did has really gone to your head, hasn't it?
Yes.
And secondly, in terms of kebabs, I did have a moment last week when we were leaving Rotherham's Stadium at about 11 o'clock in the evening, and there was a couple of very nice young lads with us who'd been to the gig, and we were chatting with them, and you and I were headed, and you happened to say, I really could go a kebab.
I did, didn't I? Yes.
And they said, oh, we'll take you to a kebab. And off you went into the wilds of Rotherham with two complete strangers. And I was just thinking to myself, he's too trusting, that man. Yeah. He's just... But I wouldn't say I was worried about it until you came back to the hotel where I was drinking with a complete stranger who'd also been
You were arm wrestling.
But I was just thinking back to the old days. I remember 30 years ago, if you'd gone to an away game in Rotherham and two locals had said, I will take you. Ethan Berg has our next question. Talking of global football. Ethan Berg's question is an interesting one. I've got a question about international friendlies played in a third country. It seems like the aim is to reach out to immigrant communities in different nations, giving them the chance to witness their country and its players firsthand. Fairly recently, Italy played matches in New York City, New Jersey and Philadelphia, a move that seemed like a no-brainer and likely successful. Taking it a step further, why wouldn't Italy opt to play against Ireland in New York City, Boston, Philadelphia, whenever the possibility arises? While it may seem a bit opportunistic, wouldn't it bring in profits? I remember it seems to have gone out of fashion a little bit, Kieran, but certainly 10 years ago, most summers you'd see Nigeria playing Ghana, or you'd see Jamaica playing in London, and they were nearly tended to sell out because, of course, there's a large African and Afro-Caribbean community who want to see their teams play. So when we talk so much about clubs being opportunistic and taking a claim aboard, this seems like a fairly sensible question.
Yeah, well, funny you mentioned that, Kevin, because taking place in the final week of May is the Unity Cup. Ghana are playing Nigeria. Jamaica are playing Trinidad and Tobago. And the winners of both those matches, the winners of between the two African teams and the two Afro-Caribbean teams, they're going to play in the final. And I'm not quite sure. I don't think they've agreed a venue yet, but it is due to take place. If there is a promoter who can put together a package, they will do so. It then comes down to negotiating with the individual football associations and trying to agree a package. So expect to see more. I mean, I think we saw Brazil versus Argentina take place in London a few years ago. It was sold out. So football associations are up for this. Again, there's an issue which has to be taken into account. What about the players? When are they? Because you now have the situation where Manchester United and Spurs are having a post-season tour as well as a pre-season tour in 25-26, and those two clubs potentially could be playing each other, of course, in the Europa League final, which has increased the amount of play. And there are consequences. And in terms of, we talk about the integrity of the game. Well, take a look at, we've just been through a weekend of matches where some teams, the integrity of the game was called into question. If you're going to put out a team of kids, and I absolutely understand, and again, it goes back to fiduciary duty, it's Manchester United's responsibility to make sure that they maximise their revenues next season. The best way of achieving that is winning the Europa League. Therefore, fighting for an extra £3 million by trying to beat Brentford yesterday, compared to 120, 150 million pounds if they go all the way next season, is a no-brainer of a decision. But if it means that Brentford qualify for the Europa League, for the Europa Conference, and Fulham don't, or Bournemouth don't, although it could be argued that Arsenal are now at the beach, and their focus on Friday night against Bournemouth was, we'll put in a half-hearted tackle here and there. There are consequences of playing in different tournaments, and such is the value of the of the Champions League, that Premier League clubs now actually see trying to find a vehicle through which they can get into the Champions League as paramount, and it actually is now more important than how they play their league matches. We saw in the EFL, Sunderland qualified for the playoffs. They knew they couldn't get promoted. They've lost their last five matches. Some of those matches were against teams at the bottom end of the table. I think there's a much broader issue, and I understand it from the club's point of view. If I was a rival of some of those clubs, I think I would be fairly peeved. And we know how conspiratorial football fans can be. I think because this has not affected the big clubs in a negative way, we're not actually seeing any debate on it. But it certainly struck me over the weekend that there are consequences of the position that we now find ourselves.
It's interesting talking about those pre- and post-season friendlies. I can't remember seeing a game or highlights of a game over the weekend where at one stage the advertising hoarding wasn't promoting a game that they were playing somewhere in the world during the summer, some of which were both pre and post. I think you make a really good point about Brentford Man United. I think had Brentford and Ipswich been locked in a two-way battle for the last relegation place, and Man United fielded that team, there may well have been more consequences. But then you would also argue Man United are a huge club, and whoever they play are going to be of Premier League quality. There's still good players. He might be a 17-year-old centre-forward, but he's still a Premier League footballer. But I think the fact, as you say, is because Brentford probably won't get into Europe. It went under the radar a little bit. And in terms of national teams too, I mean, there was a time, Kieran, when Brazil's financial plan was basically to make them the Harlem Globetrotters, wasn't it? They spent the entire season travelling the world, and even back in the day when Pelé had to play against Plymouth, it's always been a model for them, isn't it? So,
yes, the finances of South American football finance is for a separate book.
Yeah,
which could be tricky to get past the lawyers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I'm not entirely sure I'd want to be the ones asking the questions to the judge. I'd happily have a research trip to Buenos Aires, but I think there'd be more tangoing than interviewing going on. Peter Chadwick has our next question, and I love it when Peter Chadwick says, "I was wondering if you have information." Yes, of course he does, Peter. He does have this information to hand. I was wondering if you have information to hand regarding each club's wage bill to see which clubs spend the most in each league. So I'm really interested to know if league position is determined by the wage bill. I've seen bits on Twitter X, but for specific clubs rather than all the PL, EFL and National League clubs together. So, I mean, without going into too much detail, Kieran, is there a correlation between wages paid and success in each league?
Yes, there is a very strong correlation. Manchester City, when they won the Premier League last year, they had the highest wage bill. At times previously, there's been a lot of articles placed about Chelsea when the 20th anniversary of winning the Premier League for the first time under Mourinho. But if you take a look at Chelsea's wage bill that year, it wasn't just the highest, it was the highest by a significant magnitude. So that link does occur. At present, I'm just starting a research. When I say it's a research project, that is far grander than it actually is. This is not. I'm not being paid by anybody. It's not part of my university responsibilities. I'm building another spreadsheet, and I'm looking what is the closest correlation. Is it wages and wages and success, or is it wages plus amortization and success? So trying to look at those two to see post Bosman where there has been a shift in terms of lower amortization charges, of course, for players who are on Bosmans and so on. And therefore the money flows through to the players. At the same time, you have to be concerned that correlation and causality are not the same. Could it be that Manchester City had the highest wage bill last season because they won the Premier League and therefore bonuses kicked in? So in terms of direction of travel, and this is something when you do any form of statistical analysis, and I am not a statistician. I can add up, and that's about all I can do. But I can add up. I like adding up lots of things. But when you talk to statisticians, and the one example I always give, if you take a look at the number of shark attacks on the South Coast, or the number of shark attacks in Australia, and sales of ice cream, they both correlate. There is a link. So that you have the most shark attacks when you sell the most ice cream. Why is that? It's because sharks come closer when the waters are warmer. So you have to be careful here, and this is something I get quite cross about politicians because they deliberately muddy the waters. The logic would be stop selling ice cream and you won't have any shark attack. I mean, clearly there is an independent. If you said that, you go, well, that's complete nonsense. But that is the nature of what passes for political debate and intelligent discussion in many of the social media accounts of our esteemed leaders.
Statistic. When I'll tell you how long ago it was, Kieran. When I got my professional qualification, it was still called personnel management. So when I graduated as an institute from the Institute of Personnel Management, my lecturer came to what he called a rapprochement with the examiners about the statistics module, basically saying if he does a bit better in some of the others, can we turn a blind eye to statistics? It just baffled me. This whole idea of why mean, median, and average. Why can't it just have something in the middle? Why do you have to have three different? It's just unnecessary.
Mean, median, and mode.
So that's how long ago it was, Kieran. I don't think we even had modes then. Mode was somewhere where my mum bought her dresses. Actually. So the correlation then, or the causality with success, I'm just trying to think. I presume a team like Luton, when they were relegated from the Premier League, and sad to see them relegated again, I presume they would have a low wage bill. I presume Ipswich would have a low wage bill. But would Southampton and Leicester necessarily have lower wage bills than, say, West Ham or Brentford?
Well, if we take a look at the three clubs who were relegated last season, which were Sheffield United, Luton Town, and Burnley. Luton Town had the lowest average wage of £25,000 a week, based on my figures.
Yeah, sure.
Other calculations are available. I have to always stress this. Sheffield United had the second lowest on £28,000 a week, and I think Burnley might have actually scraped into fourth lowest.
Right. Okay.
You had the three clubs with the lowest wage bills, and if you take a look at the top of the Premier League, Manchester City finished first, highest wage bill. Arsenal finished second. I think they had the fourth highest wage bill. Liverpool, and so on. So there is a linkage. It does help to identify outliers. Some clubs overperform compared to their wage and overall player costs. And here I would bring in the amortization cost. I was on a panel with Sports Resolutions on Thursday, and that was hosted by Jackie Oakley as a moderator from BBC, Nick DeMarco, Nick Craig there, Jane Purden there, all people, all from a lawyer's background, and then so they very studiously answers all the legal questions, the legal questions and so on. And I'm going, what am I hearing? And somebody goes, what's the best run club financially in the Premier League? So I have to give sort of, and in my opinion, it's Brentford. And the reason why I say that is that the Brentford wage bill is still very much bottom six.
Oh, okay.
And you look at and you take a look at their wages in the first three seasons in the Premier League. First year, they're paying just 30 grand a week. They survive comfortably. Second year, 45 this year. So last season, 53 and so on. So there are outliers, and then you have to identify why are those outliers arising. Is it just a one-off, as we saw with Leicester City? Still fantastic. Can never take it away. Brilliant achievement. As a football fan, absolutely delighted. But it's very difficult to repeat that, and Leicester weren't able to repeat that. But they did pretty well for a few seasons. People forget that as well. So then you do your research, and it tends to be: does the club have a culture? Does the club have a strategy? Does it have a long-term plan? And these start to come to fruition, and this is why we see some clubs overperforming. Why are clubs underperforming? It's because they've got no strategy, they've got no culture. It's short-term decision making, and it's. They asked me on Thursday why did I think Brentford was so successful, and I said, in my opinion, they've got a board of directors and they've got an owner who ignores the noise. And it's very difficult to ignore the noise.
Although interesting, though, to hear it wasn't their director of football, it was director of operations, someone who was on 5 Live yesterday before the Brentford Man United game. They were discussing the Thomas Frank replacement plan, and he said there isn't one. He said we're going to wait until Thomas Frank tells us whether he's staying or going, and then we'll decide. Which has led to a quite interesting debate on 5 Live about the difference between that plan and Brighton's plan, which is that they will know who the next manager is and probably the one after, or they'll know who they want to go for. But
I suspect Brentford know exactly what their plans are. They just don't want to put it. The reason why they're so good at what they do is that they go under the radar and they know who it is.
Yeah, fair enough. Jackie Oakley's brilliant, isn't she?
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah.
She's cool. She's such a brilliant broadcaster. Some of the stuff she had to go through to get there was shocking. Lincoln Pigman is an old friend of the show, Kieran, and he has this question. Do footballers in England have pension plans? Does this differ by Premier League versus EFL? And are the plans provided through the clubs? I would imagine they would be individual plans, wouldn't they, Kieran?
No, there is a professional footballer pension plan.
Oh, okay.
There is a fund, and the contribution per player is £6,900 per player per year. The figures might have gone up. And that is funded, and this is something people aren't aware of, there is a levy on every single transfer.
Oh. Okay.
So it is a bit like the tote funds, horse racing. That this transfer levy, which I think is something like 3 or 4%, so that gets paid across to the football authorities, and that is used to fund this scheme. In addition to this, of course, you can have AVCs, additional voluntary contributions into your pension scheme, and that does have tax benefits for you as a player. If you are a professional footballer, if you, I think if you retired before 2006, or whether it could be that you started your career, I'll have to check the details. You used to be able to claim your pension as a professional footballer from the age of 35. But that stopped in 2006, and it was then increased to 55. So you can start to draw down from your pension at the age of 55 because you are a professional athlete. And even, there's not too many players. I mean, James Milner probably still would play. And what we have seen since 2021 is again, this is sort of effectively a directive from HMRC for tax purposes, is that for every year that there's an increase when the state pension rules kick in, for every year of increase, then there's a consequent increase for football players as well. So it will be rising, I think, from 2021 to 57, because the retirement age, as I have to retire now at 67 as opposed to 65. Although, don't tell the Baroness, I'm already in discussions about not retiring.
Ever.
No.
Yeah. Or in other words, you're not in discussions about retiring. Yeah. So that's an interesting. So a footballer who has to retire through injury at the age of 32 can't draw down his pension for 25 years.
Well, if there is a career curtailing injury, there are clauses which might be able to help.
Right.
But I'll be honest, if you're a league, if you played your career in League Two and you smash your knee at the age of 32, pension ain't worth having.
Sure.
Because you're the way that you calculate an annual pension is that you would do an expectation. You get an actuary involved when we're expected life. Let's say you expect that person to live to 85, 53 years worth of pension payments on somebody that's only been in employment for 10 years.
Sure.
There are complications.
And is this only in the 92, or does it extend to every professional player down to the National League and beyond?
That's a fair comment. I will investigate further. I think it's just the 92, right. But it could be, with so many former EFL clubs now in the National League.
Yeah,
I'll do some homework.
Okay. Well, I'm sure our friends at the PFA will only be too happy to let us know those details.
At Capella University, you can learn at your own pace with our FlexPath learning format. Take 1 or 2 courses at a time and complete as many as you can in a 12-week billing session. With FlexPath, you can even finish the bachelor's degree you started in 22 months for $20,000. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu. Fastest 25% of students. Cost varies by pace, transfer credits, and other factors. Fees apply.
This episode is brought to you by Greenlight. Get this. Adults with financial literacy skills have 82% more wealth than those who don't. From swimming lessons to piano classes, us parents invest in so many things to enrich our kids' lives. But are we investing in their future financial success? With Greenlight, you can teach your kids financial literacy skills like earning, saving, and investing. And this investment costs less than that after-school treat. Start prioritizing their financial education and future today with a risk-free trial at greenlight.com/Spotify. Greenlight.com/Spotify.
Our final 2 questions, Kieran, take us to London. And the first one is from John Fulgoni. And for various reasons, different reasons, I have to say, Spurs Stadium is of much interest to our listeners as West Ham Stadium, basically. And John Fulgoni says, in their financial statements for 22-23, Tottenham Hotspur revalued their stadium upwards by a net increase of £447 million as of June the 30th, 2023. This was done by reserve accounting. That is, the revaluation reserve and stadium assets on the balance sheet were both increased by this amount. I'm out, by the way, now, Kieran. Just to let you know. Thus, the change was not reflected in the income statement net loss of £87 million. Can you please provide some insight as to why Spurs did this?
Okay. Let's say that you buy a house for £100,000 20 years ago. And today, its market value is £500,000. So can you see that you've got a gain of £400,000, but it's not reflected anywhere? If I did that and I wanted to borrow money, if I go to a bank and say, look, I'm starting up a business, I'm buying myself a new car, I want to go on a cruise, I'm getting old, I want to go, cruise, the greatest kebab houses in the world, whatever it's going to be, doesn't matter what it is. Will you lend me some money And the bank will say, do you want this as a secured loan or an unsecured loan? If it's secured, they say, well, what's it secured on? I say, well, look, my house is now worth $500,000, and I'll get a valuation person along. They say, yeah, it's worth $500,000, and the bank will lend. Well, this is broadly the same with Spurs. Should Spurs want to borrow more money, and Spurs have borrowed a huge amount of money, but then they borrowed it at fantastically low rates. In their books, it says, we've got a stadium worth $1 billion, we've borrowed $700 million. If they want to borrow another $400 million, if somebody looked at that and said, well, the stadium's in the books at $1 billion, and they've now borrowed over $1 billion, that looks a bit creaky. All that they're doing is that they're doing effectively the same as myself. They've invited a surveyor along. They say, well, whilst it cost us $1 billion, it's worth $1.4 billion. Let's stick that in. It's housekeeping. It makes the accounts look a little bit better than they are. And it could also be that if you are borrowing money, what banks will do, they will normally have as part of the lending arrangement something called a restrictive covenant. And that will say that if you are borrowing more, it's a bit like, if you had a 60% mortgage, you can borrow at 3%. If you've got a 100% mortgage, you borrow at 7% because the bank's taking on more risk. By revaluing upwards, it means that Spurs, in theory, can borrow more money at cheaper rates going forward. So those will be the links. And you're absolutely right, John. In terms of impact on PSR, there's none because infrastructure costs are excluded from PSR anyway.
You know those Viking cruises, Kieran, that they advertise almost extensively on daytime TV? I think
I'll take word for it.
At the age of, if they do one to the best kebab houses of the world, then at the age of 75, you and me are treating ourselves.
Yes, we are.
To a 4-week tour on a Viking cruise ship. Or you could get one of those it's quite a lucrative circuit. You get on the cruise ships doing lectures about football finance every night.
Do you know that has actually been pitched to me?
Of course it has. I would think about it. They pay, I'm told, obviously, mine is not the sort of comedy that would play well on the cruise ships, but I'm told they pay considerable amounts of money.
A friend of mine did used to work on the cruise ships, and he was telling me, this was many a year ago, he was telling me about the Nolan sisters. And they used to do the cruises. And I think they could practically drink every single person on the boat under the table if the stories are true.
Yeah. Let's leave that there and get on to our last question, which comes from Steve Wareham. And Steve's been a QPR season ticket holder since 1966. I'm going to go Stan Bowles. That'll be his favourite player. I tell you what, Steve, you've seen some players at QPR in that time. That QPR team that came second. What a football team that was! What a kit as well. Steve Wareham has. I hope he was at Wembley for the League Cup win. Steve Wareham has this question. QPR received what I believe was a world record fine of £40+ million for breaches of rules FFP following the disastrous tenures of Hughes and Redknapp, and we've never really recovered from those times. Luton received huge points deductions at around the same time. So why were we fined and not given a points deduction? Were there different rules at the time? I think Luton's was up in the 40 points as well, wasn't it? Massive points. It's a good question, though, and it's still a bit of a murky old. I mean, I was doing Match Today 2 at the time. It's still a bit of a murky old period for QPR and Leicester, but Luton. So why was one fined money and one fined points?
Right. The QPR issue, and it was a £42 million fine, but when you actually going into the small print, it wasn't quite as burdensome because it was QPR had to pay the EFL's legal costs back in 2014. The legal costs were only £3 million.
Wow, those were the days.
Those are the days, absolutely, yes. They also had to convert £20 million worth of loans into shares, so there was no cash cost. And whilst the offence took place in 2014, QPR have still not repaid the fine, or they've not paid off the fine. They're paying off, I think it's about 1.2 million, 1.3 million a year. So it probably works out on on a fair value basis as about £9 or £10 million, and they got the benefit of £100 million of extra TV money. So in my view, yes, it was. Remember, and that took 4 years to resolve.
Yeah,
because I remember I was in Canada and somebody leaked me the report. This was in 2018, so somebody leaked the EFL report to me early, and I put it out on social media, and then I got a little message from a guy who I didn't know at the time, a little guy called Nick DeMarco. He says, Kieran, is there any chance you could take it down?
Yeah.
And I thought, Italian name, I'm taking it down.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's not delve into the implications of that, Kieran. But can you just remind us of what the original QPR shenanigan was?
Yes, the issue was that Queen's Park Rangers had disguised they claimed that a £60 million write-off of a loan from the owners should be included as part of income and therefore go into the PSR or the FFP calculations. The EFL argued it's an internal decision, it's a bit of a financial and accounting housekeeping, and therefore should be excluded. And eventually, the settlement was a financial one.
Right, but they came out ahead, you think, considering they had the £100 million.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand the frustration from QPR fans, but I don't think that fine was a driver of the relative lack of success that they've had since then.
Right.
I mean, I remember at the time because Bobby Zamora scored the winning goal at Wembley. So
and
it's the type of thing you tend to remember.
So what about the Luton then and the points?
Luton's was a charge from the Football Association.
Right.
The thing is the relationship between the EFL and the Premier League is such, and we know that they're not on good terms. There has been a slight change in the EFL constitution in the last week, which does suggest that they're operating, they're talking to each other at some levels. But the rules effectively used to be that if you breach conditions in the EFL and you get a points deduction, the Premier League says, well, we're not going to apply that points deduction because it's our competition is independent of you. And the EFL have said the same for clubs that have financially done things wrong in the other competition as well. If it's to do with the FA in theory is there to look after the interests of everybody in football as a whole. So therefore they can impose global sanctions, and the sanctions against Luton were, in my view, far too harsh because it was the owners who had done these, and you get that interesting debate as what is an appropriate sanction.
And what had Luton done? Remind us.
This goes back to 2009. I can't remember the exact. It was various forms of financial chicanery from the owners.
Okay. Right. Thank you to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page and everyone who has now joined the brand new Price of Football Club. If you'd like to join the club too, get ad-free listening, bonus episodes and more, and invite to our monthly Q&A session, which is taking place next week, go to our website, priceoffootball.com. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter X and you can find us on YouTube. And if you'd like to buy one of our excellent books or even a Price of Football t-shirt, you can find all the details on that website, priceoffootball.com. We'll be back on Thursday with our news pod, which will be a good listen for hungover Reading fans and an interesting one for Nottingham Forest fans. Also, it's an amazing amount of news for this time of year, Kieran, going on. The juicy guy sent it through this morning. In the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, as always, thank you so much for the level of interaction, the number of questions that we get. We were actually on the phone before we recorded the show, talking to a club, and some clubs are making huge progress in terms of the level of transparency and That is to be applauded, and we will applaud it. Yeah, we're not here just to do the negatives. Thank you for everybody that's a member of the Price of Football Club. You'll be getting a notice as to our next meeting, which I think is Tuesday week.
Tuesday, a week tomorrow, I think.
Yeah, week tomorrow. Yes. Yeah. The only issue is I'm name dropping here. I'm doing the overlap with I think Scholes Carragher, and I think Gary Neville might be putting in a special guest appearance. Sir Gary. So our Gaz. So I've got to get home in time for that, but I'll do my level best to do so. There's various ways of supporting the show, and one of them is to give us a review on social media. It genuinely makes a difference, and we pride ourselves on being independent of the gambling industry and the football industry. So we don't seek money from those, and those people that do support us on the club, we hope you're getting really good value in terms of our meetings and so on. But times are tight for everybody. So by all means, if you can support the show another way, that's to give us a review. You could even say you would rather have, and this is on the back of a court case this week. You would rather have the show presented by Prince Harry and my Uncle Terry, who for a very reasonable fee will be able to provide you, Your Highness, with appropriate levels of protection.
Yeah, well, if you can take him. Where's Harry? He's being protected in a pub in Bermondsey.
He's having a good sing-song.
They've got a lock-in.
and I love his gran.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The Price of Football. The Price of Football.